Good morning, everybody, and my name is Trisha Tinsley with Citizen Coach. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight with Citizen Coach is that at any point when you are in the public and serving the public, you are basically a community leader. And the work that community leaders do is sometimes very challenging. So this morning we're going to hear from another one of another person that I know who is out there working really diligently in the community to make people's lives better. And it is Joe Tinsley. And yes, there is a relation. And we've known each other. We've known each other for quite some time. And I've watched him grow. We both graduated with psychology degrees. And I've watched him grow into quite the activist, which I consider you an activist anyway.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm really excited to have you, Joe. And I'll just kind of give you the mic about what brought you to the work that you do now, or what do you do now? Let's start there.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. And again, thanks for having me on and flattering me with the title of a community leader. I manage the needle exchange program for Seattle and King County Public Health Department. So I oversee three different needle exchange programs within the HIV STD program of the health department.
And so the main purpose of this is to really decrease AIDS being spread from user to user. Is that correct?
Yeah, I like to sort of explain it. We have two sort of main goals within our program. One is to stop the spread of HIV, hepatitis C, and other bloodborne pathogens. And then the other is to try to ensure that all used injection-related equipment is properly disposed of and taken out of the public waste stream. So when I explain sort of the program, I use my sports analogy. If you think of a football field, you've got two goals on either side of the field. So one, stopping the spread of HIV and other bloodborne pathogens. On the other end of the field, you've got ensuring that stuff is, our used equipment is properly disposed of. And then this is where my sports analogy breaks down, because as you know, I'm not a sporty person, but all the white lines within the football field are all the other services that we provide to keep people safe and healthy while they're doing what they're doing until they're ready to make some sort of a behavior change around stopping or reducing their use.
Mm-hmm. And that's really powerful work. I mean, how difficult it is, when people go into situations where they know that people are possibly using and they're having these, let's say, any kind of addiction, there's a lot of different schools of thought about how to deal with that. So how did you come to think that, okay, well, we just need to provide these services because people are using? So it's almost like an embracing of the situation, like this is what is, and let's provide what we can. So how did you actually come to that belief?
Right. Well, I think, part of it has to do, I think, just with my personal background. My mother, I'm originally from Arizona, and my mother ran 4 inpatient residential drug treatment facilities. So my before school, my after school, my summer break, my winter break was all pretty much spent in drug treatment, which is a little bit different than daycare.
Right,
a little bit more colorful than daycare. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, so I have been throughout my life, particularly like the formative years, surrounded by people that were struggling with addiction. In the environment of trying to stop their addiction. And so when I moved up to Seattle and was going to school, I started volunteering at the needle exchange, thinking like, oh, I know all about, people that use drugs, like this will be easy. And it was actually a whole new world for me in terms of working with folks that were in active addiction, so not necessarily at the point of being able to or wanting to stop their use. And so it was very intriguing to me that we could provide a service to somebody that was actively using, and that they weren't necessarily defined by their drug use, which to me I think was just like the clouds parted and the sunshine came in and the angels started singing, like, oh, we don't have to define people just by one activity that they're engaged in. Like, how awesome is that? And the program operates under the harm reduction principles, and you kind of sort of alluded to it in the forming of the question, but really harm reduction, we sort of take the step of like, all right, or the stance, I realize that you're going to be engaging in some potentially harmful activities and behaviors. What can we do to help reduce that use, not only to yourself, but also to the community at large? And so it's really not vilifying anyone for the behaviors that they're engaging in, but really offering different options, different alternatives, different tools to keep people safe while they're doing that activity, as well as building relationship and trust, so that when somebody is ready to make a pretty monumental behavior change, there's a safe environment in which to do that in. And so I kind of jokingly say that I became addicted to the program because I've been here. I just celebrated my 20th year
My goodness.
as part of the program. Yeah, I know. It makes me sound really old when I say it out
Well,
loud.
I mean, you kind of are.
I am kind of. I know. Only family can get away with that. But it's true. Being able to work with people that are going through just really rough, sometimes horrific periods of time in their life, and being able to provide a service that is not only helpful, but also lays some foundational work for um, hopefully some eventual behavior change. I think it's it's awesome.
Well, I mean, you talked about, so I really appreciate that you have this light bulb go off for you and the angels, came and sang and the clouds parted. And I hear that you got a lot of your inspiration from your mom, or just even like, I think that the exposure that you had as a kid is something that kind of helps you to, prep the foundation for what you do.
Definitely.
But there's still something in you that basically, so there might be a calling. For instance, me and my siblings, who we all have the same parents and we all have the same experience, much like you. My dad took us around. He was a doctor, and he took us around to see everything. We saw all of it. We went to the emergency room where there was no like sitting around. At a daycare center, we saw everything that he saw and we shared it. But really, that's a calling that's there, but you don't have to answer it, right?
Right.
My siblings were like, we're not interested in building strong communities or being out there. I mean, they do stuff, they do some volunteering, but not in the capacity that I do. So what in you basically said, this is what I need to do?
I think that I guess for me, the being part of a minority group, I think made it even more important for me to be out of marginalized groups, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, like I don't firsthand know exactly what you're going through, but I can certainly relate to my own experiences of being the other, or being the only one in the room. And so I think it's my way of I don't know, including people. I mean, it astounds me that when people walk into my clinic or my space, that the interactions that they have with my staff and my team, that's like one of the few positive interactions they have all day or all week. And I think that that's such a shame. And so for me, it's a even more of a driving force to make sure that the environment that they walk into is always welcoming, is always like friendly, is always um, geared towards validating that you are a person and you do deserve some respect and some kindness and some acknowledgement that you are more than just the drug that you ingest. And I think back, I just continually reflect on my experiences in the world of being treated as the other. I went to a fancy prep school for high school where all of my classmates were like rich white folks, which there's nothing wrong with rich white folks. But that was not my experience, right? I was on financial aid. I had to work in the kitchen. And so like I was the other. And I guess I always just want to make sure that people that feel like they're the other know that there are other people out there that care and respect and validate them and want to create like a safe space for them. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does. That's fantastic.
Okay.
I feel like I'm getting to know you for the first time.
After all these years.
Well, I mean, and so now that you have done all of this work, what do you think that you as an individual, what impact do you think you've had on the community?
It's so funny because I don't really look at it that way, like that I'm making some big impact and that I'm changing the world or changing somebody's life. Um, for me, what I think is really awesome is when I run into people that have used our services over the last 20 years, and I run into them outside of this environment. So, um, I'm at a restaurant, waiting for a friend, and I'm sitting at the bar having a drink, and the bartender's like, "Hey, do you remember me?" And I say, "Well, no, not really." They're like, "Oh, I used to come in an exchange, and you were always so nice to me. Like, I just thank you." So like to me, that's the most important impact that I could make on somebody's life. Um, uh, when people come in here and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're still here," and I'm like, "Yeah, well, where else would I go? Like, this is like my second home." I look at the folks that use our services, you know, as family. Because for many of them, I've known for 20 years, and we have gone through life together, and in an interesting way that most people don't get to experience. Like I hear people's histories and stories. Again, because we create this environment where people feel comfortable and people feel safe, it's not the conversations aren't always just about HIV prevention or treatment access, but people feel safe and comfortable just telling their life stories, and I'm always so incredibly like humbled and honored to be able to hear what people go through, and I'm so inspired by the resilience of the folks that use this service that I am like a weak mortal. Like if my pillow's not fluffy enough, I get all cranky, or if they put an olive in my martini instead of the lemon twist, I'm all offended. Where you know my folks are the folks that come in here, they're having to live on the street, and that is a completely different battleground than most of us are used to. And for them to be able to deal with all of that and then come in and have like awesome conversations that are light and fluffy and enlightening, I'm just I'm in awe. Again, I think I went on a tangent. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. This is
Okay.
one.
You can tell I've had my coffee this morning.
Well, I think that when I'm hearing you, I really do get inspired too, because there's just something that happens when you actually realize that when you see the work that you've done. Because a lot of times when you're working in a situation like you're working with, where you're dealing with the public, people who are really, and I've been in your office before, right? And so I can see a lot of the people who are coming through. And then in downtown Seattle, we see a lot of people who are clearly homeless, or they've, they're struggling. And this is not to say that people who look put together aren't struggling either, but the resiliency and just the care that you've taken, and then being able to actually come and like see the results of that must be really rewarding. So I really,
yeah, I mean, oh, go ahead.
well, I think that, but I'm curious about so all these years that you were working at public health with the needle exchange, I know that you have some opinions about what makes communities better. So I just love to hear about what your opinion of that is.
Yeah, I mean, community is it's such a big word. And I think for me, community can come in so many different sizes and so many different shapes and so many different makeups. And the most important thing, I think, for me is that anybody can be part of your community. Everybody is part of your community. I mean, when I'm down here and we're open, it is not at all unlikely to see somebody at the exchange counter that is obviously homeless, that is obviously, nobody wants to sit next to them in the back of the bus, like that type of person. Though I always sit in the back of the bus, just to clarify.
Okay.
But to have them standing right next to somebody that looks just like you or me, or that looks way better than you or me, that is all well-to-do, well done up, and put together, and I think that really highlights that we're all part of this community. The folks that use my services aren't just the folks that we see on like Cops and Law and Order, but they really are any of us and can be any of us. And one of the things that I get super jazzed about is we have a volunteer component of our program. We get a lot of students that are in, nursing school or pharmacy school or pre-med or thinking about going into the social service world. And I love the day that I see the light bulb go off in their eyes or in their mind, where it's like, oh, wow, this person that I just served looks totally like my professor, or looks like somebody I would have gone to school with.
Right.
So that this idea of, the people who use drugs are this, tiny subset that is scary and dangerous and horrible, gets shattered. And it's like, oh, wow, it really could be anybody. That could be me. And then that's when I pounce on them and say like, okay, so I have seen, you have just seen the light. Your eyes are a little bit brighter. Let's talk about like how this will transfer into your work that you're eventually going to be doing with a patient or with a customer. Like, how are you going to have those conversations with them in a respectful manner to meet their healthcare needs? So like that is part of my, I guess, contribution to community building, where just because somebody walks into this clinic doesn't mean that they're not walking into Nordstrom's, or that you're sitting next to them at church, or that they're serving you dinner at a restaurant. Like we all have and we all have a connection to each other. And so how do you respect that? How do you honor that? And how do you just treat people nicely?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it sounds like you're really speaking to that sense of breaking down that otherness that you talked about, that you grew up with, and that still continues today, because once you see someone as other, then that ownership and compassion can kind of disappear.
Exactly.
Well, I don't want to keep you for too long. I really appreciate some of the things that you've talked about and taken the time
Yeah.
for this and the
Well,
work.
I appreciate that you're doing this. Like, what a great way to highlight just what people are doing
Mhm.
within their communities, which then affect other communities. Like, this is great.
Yeah. So the last, excuse me, the last question I want to ask you, and just for everybody who's listening, you should know that Joe is probably one of the biggest fans of Stevie Wonder. And that may not even be a word for how much you love his work and him, I guess.
I call him Uncle Stevie.
Okay, well, uh, if only he knew, right? I'm sure that he has, because
Hmm.
I know that you've seen him. Or I know you've met him, right? Once.
I wish, only in my dreams. No, I've seen him live twice, which were earth-shattering, life-changing experiences, but never gotten to like shake the hand.
Well, if you moved to Flint or Detroit, just by the way, that would probably bridge that gap a little bit more because he's always showing up there. Anyway, and I mean, when we were there in Michigan, we're just like, oh, Stevie Wonder is coming into town. We're just like, nah. Um, he's always here. No, I'm just kidding. So that funny line from Eddie Murphy's skit, where he got a lot of flack for making fun of Stevie Wonder, and there's like Stevie Wonder's a musical genius.
Hmm.
So what would you say to somebody who said that Stevie Wonder isn't a musical genius?
What would I say to somebody that said that Stevie Wonder wasn't a musical genius? Well, I would probably ask a clarifying question like, are you serious? Have you not heard Songs of the Key of Life Volume 1 and 2? Um, have you never seen him live?
Are you
And if
legit,
they
right?
still had the pushback, I would probably politely stop the conversation and just walk away. Because sometimes you can't change people's opinions. And I'm not gonna go to jail for beating up
Oh, okay.
somebody that's stupid.
All right.
Yeah.
I one time said that the Temptations in front of somebody that the Temptations was one of the best singing groups of all time. And
Hmm.
someone got so angry at me. And they're like,
Hmm.
I cannot claim that. I'm like, have you heard the Temptations?
Right, right. Have you
Like,
seen
have
them in
you
their
heard?
choreographed moves?
Right. And I said singing groups, it's very, very different categories. Anyway,
Well,
um,
I'll tell you a funny story. When I first started working with this program, I started off as a volunteer, and I was also volunteering at a after school program for kids up on Capitol Hill, and it was a very unique program because it was a very inclusive program. So there were like AP super smart kids that were doing calculus that I could not help them with our homework. And then there were kids with special needs and like wheelchairs and sign language and stuff. So it was a great diverse group of kids. And one day I made a comment about Stevie Wonder. And they were like, what? Who? And I said, who? Who? Stevie Wonder, Stevie Wonder. They're like, oh, we've never heard of him. I said, okay.
oh
So the
boy.
next day, I brought in like half of my Stevie Wonder CD collection, and then I tortured them for a month. I was like, okay, who are we listening to today? And they'd be like, Stevie Wonder. And I'm like, I will convert you at some point. I will convert you.
And see,
So
another way you're changing communities.
right, these poor kids, they didn't know
For the
they didn't
world.
know Stevie Wonder, they didn't know James Brown, they didn't know Marvin Gaye. I was like, okay,
Oh, so
we're this
sad.
summer we're gonna learn.
What a
We're gonna do this.
deprived life, those poor kids.
I know, I know.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Joe. And
Well, thank you.
yeah, so you just keep on keeping on out there. And
I will do my best.
yeah, and thanks for being out in the community and doing the work you do.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me on your show. I feel completely honored.
All right. Well, take care, and thank you everybody for listening.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Are you